Hello everyone and a warm welcome to the Territory of Cinema channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button to support our content. Today, we are going to be discussing the film xXx Return of Xander Cage from 2017. The narrative kicks off with a high-octane display of extreme sports espionage, immediately setting a tone familiar to fans of the franchise, yet infused with a slightly more global and contemporary edge. We are reintroduced to Xander Cage, that quintessential extreme sports icon turned secret agent, whose very existence seems predicated on defying gravity and authority in equal measure. His supposed death is revealed to be a carefully orchestrated disappearance, a self-imposed exile that allowed him to indulge his true passion, pushing the limits of human capability through snowboarding, surfing, and dirt biking, far from the geopolitical chess games he once navigated. This quiet existence is violently disrupted when a former operative, Gibbons, who often served as a grounding force and mentor to Xander in earlier exploits, is tragically killed during a mission to retrieve Pandora's box, a supposedly impenetrable device capable of controlling the world's satellite arsenal. This loss acts as the catalyst, pulling Xander back from his self-imposed paradise into the murky world of espionage. The recruitment process is characteristically unorthodox. Xander is coerced into returning by the enigmatic Jane, a high-ranking CIA official who understands that the established bureaucratic methods won't cut it against this new threat. She grants him the autonomy he craves, essentially saying, "Go build your own team, Xander." This freedom is crucial, as it allows Xander to assemble a crew that mirrors his own ethos, skill forged in the fire of underground subcultures rather than traditional military academies. Enter the supporting cast, each a specialist plucked from obscurity. There's Tennyson Nads Nadir, a skilled DJ and surveillance expert whose connection to the underground music scene gives him unparalleled access to information networks. Then there is the adrenaline-fueled duo, Adele Wolfe and Darius Stone, former Special Forces soldiers whose rigidity initially clashes with Xander's free-spirited approach, but whose combat prowess is undeniable. Wolfe, in particular, brings a steely focus, perhaps reminiscent of the focused intensity required by top-tier athletes balancing rigorous training with public perception. Their primary objective is tracking down Xiang, a formidable former operative who has gone rogue. Xiang isn't just stealing weapons. He's driven by a deep-seated desire for vengeance against the very system that empowered and then discarded him. This internal conflict, the betrayer turned revolutionary, gives the antagonists a weight often missing in simple action fare. The ensuing hunt takes the team across breathtaking international landscapes, from the bustling markets of Mumbai to the frigid plains of Russia, each location serving as a spectacular backdrop for Xander's signature blend of extreme stunts integrated into infiltration tactics. The film clearly leans into the idea that unconventional thinking is the only way to beat an enemy that operates outside the lines. Xander's philosophy has always been about momentum, about letting the environment dictate the action, a trait that makes him a perfect foil for the highly disciplined, perhaps overly cautious, government agencies he nominally works for. The plot thickens when the team discovers that Pandora's box is not just a theoretical threat, it's a very real mechanism capable of causing global chaos. The mission shifts from recovery to direct confrontation with Yang and his highly trained mercenaries. The action sequences are choreographed not just for spectacle, but to highlight the unique skills of each team member. Nads hacking systems mid-chase, Wolfe demonstrating precision marksmanship, and Xander weaving through impossible scenarios on motorbikes and snowmobiles. The climax involves a daring infiltration of a heavily fortified island base. This sequence is pure, unadulterated Xander Cage territory, diving out of high altitudes, executing complex parkour maneuvers through enemy defenses, and finally, coming face-to-face with Xiang. The final showdown isn't merely a fistfight, it's a philosophical clash between Xander's belief in choosing your own path, even if it's reckless, and Xiang's bitter realization that loyalty is often a one-way street. In the resolution, the immediate threat is neutralized, Pandora's box secured, and the world narrowly avoids catastrophe thanks to the team's willingness to ignore procedure. Xander, having fulfilled his obligation, isn't quite ready to settle down. He's proven that his brand of controlled chaos is not obsolete. In fact, it might be the only currency that matters in this new global game. The film ends, as expected, with the promise of further adventures, suggesting that as long as there are impossible stunts to perform and hidden agendas to expose, Xander Cage will always return to the fray. The initial reintroduction to Xander Cage is less a return and more a vivid declaration of his perfected, self-styled existence. We see him not in a military base or high-tech command center, but carving down a seemingly impossible, heavily forested slope on a snowboard, the snow spraying behind him like a white banner signaling freedom. This wasn't just extreme sports, it was his meditation, his way of keeping the adrenaline necessary for espionage alive without the moral compromises of Langley. His quiet life in the Dominican Republic, filled with sun, surfing, and tinkering with customized vehicles, emphasizes the cost of his previous life, a life he traded for peace, only to have it violently reclaimed. The loss of Gibbons hit Xander harder than any physical injury could. Gibbons represented the last tangible link to the old guard, a figure who understood the necessity of bending rules without breaking core values. His death isn't just a plot device, it's a personal betrayal by the system Xander briefly tried to trust again. It's this raw, personal motivation that fuels Xander's subsequent recklessness. When Jane corners him, she's not just offering a job, she's offering a chance for vengeance channeled productively. Her understanding of Xander, recognizing that trying to confine him is futile, is what makes her an effective handler. She delegates control, understanding that Xander's genius lies in improvisation, much like a top-tier freestyle athlete who has trained years to react instantly to unpredictable conditions. The assembly of the new xXx team is a masterclass in Xander's recruitment philosophy. Find the outliers who operate beyond the established grids. Tennyson Nadir, or Nads, isn't just a DJ, he's the sonic architect of the underworld, someone whose ability to read underground pulse translates directly into knowing who is moving where faster than any conventional wiretap. His presence injects a necessary element of chaotic energy and digital fluency into the group. The dynamic between Wolf and Stone is initially fascinating to observe. Wolf embodies the disciplined focus honed by elite training, perhaps mirroring the unwavering dedication seen in Olympic-level competitors who sacrifice everything for marginal gains. Stone, conversely, brings a gruff, street-smart edge that complements her technical prowess. Their friction with Xander, whose methods often look like sheer luck to the trained eye, serves as necessary dramatic tension, reminding the audience that Xander's brilliance is rooted in intuition over protocol. Jiang, the primary antagonist, is given significant depth, portrayed not as a simple terrorist, but as a disillusioned ghost of the intelligence community. His bitterness stems from being used and discarded, a familiar occupational hazard for those who play the shadow games. This mirroring, Xander choosing self-exile while Xiang chooses open rebellion, creates a compelling thematic resonance. Both are highly capable men who rejected the bureaucracy, but one sought peace while the other sought retribution. The international set pieces are designed to exploit Xander's unique skill set, transforming mundane urban environments into extreme sports playgrounds. The sequence in Mumbai, involving daring motorcycle stunts through narrow, crowded streets, feels less like spycraft and more like a televised X Games event where the stakes are global security. This commitment to practical, high-risk action grounds the fantasy, suggesting that the most effective agents are those who treat combat like performance art, demanding absolute commitment and flawless execution. The integration of these elements ensures the film honors its legacy, proving that the spectacle isn't just gratuitous, it is the methodology. As the team closes in, the emotional stakes rise alongside the physical ones. The discovery regarding Pandora's box, that it allows for the instantaneous deactivation of global defense satellites, introduces a terrifying vulnerability that the traditional military structure is ill-equipped to handle. This is where Xander truly shines. He thrives when the rulebook is irrelevant, when success hinges on a split-second decision made under overwhelming duress. The final confrontation on the island is the culmination of this philosophy. Xander's ascent, utilizing whatever physical structures present themselves, a jet ski jump onto a moving helicopter, a free fall onto a rooftop, is his ultimate argument for his own existence. That rigid structure invites predictable failure, whereas adaptive fluidity ensures survival. The final exchange with Xiang is telling. Xander doesn't lecture about patriotism. He validates Xiang's pain but rejects his destructive conclusion, offering a path forward rooted in choosing one's own allegiance rather than reacting violently to old slights. Xander's triumph is confirming that controlled chaos can indeed save the very order it appears to defy. The narrative's insistence on viewing espionage through the lens of extreme sports isn't mere aesthetic choice. It's the core of Xander's characterization. Think of a world-class downhill skier who understands the physics of speed and risk better than any theoretical strategist. That is Xander. His supposed retirement wasn't laziness. It was the necessary maintenance period for a highly tuned machine requiring constant high-velocity input. When Gibbons is taken out, the shock isn't just the death of a friend, but the proof that the shadows he escaped are darker and more organized than he anticipated. The grief Xander exhibits is understated, a tightly controlled burn that fuels his return, reminiscent of an athlete who channels intense frustration into perfect form during the next run. Jane's recruitment strategy is shrewd because she recognizes that Xander responds to agency, not orders. She plays directly into his ego, the need to be the best, the fastest, the most innovative. By granting him total operational control, she effectively validates his entire life philosophy, that the established hierarchy is inherently flawed and slow. Her character acts as a necessary bridge between the bureaucratic world and Xander's anarchy, a figure of authority who is wise enough to step aside and let true talent dictate the pace. The creation of the new xXx team feels like assembling a fantasy league roster of global outlaws, each bringing a highly specialized, almost artisanal skill set. Nads, with his finger on the pulse of digital subversion through music culture, embodies the modern spy who fights with data streams rather than bullets, reflecting the evolving nature of modern conflict that requires understanding cultural movements as much as troop movements. Wolf and Stone provide the necessary ballast. Wolf, with her military background, likely carries the quiet intensity of someone who has seen the devastating consequences of half measures, a focus that sometimes borders on paranoia, which Xander continually has to break through with infectious optimism. Stone offers the grounded skepticism, the necessary voice asking, "Is this crazy plan actually going to work?" which Xander typically answers with a dare. Xiang's evolution from operative to antagonist is the film's most compelling psychological thread. He is the cautionary tale for Xander. What happens when the disillusionment hardens into destructive intent instead of self-imposed distance? Xiang's drive for vengeance against the apparatus that created him is deeply human, reflecting the classic narrative of the prodigy betrayed. His utilization of the satellite weapon system, Pandora's box, underscores his belief that true power lies in dismantling the controlling structures entirely, a nihilistic antithesis to Xander's desire to simply enjoy the freedom outside those structures. The globe-trotting sequences are designed to showcase adaptation under extreme pressure. The action in Thailand, for instance, involving high-speed snowmobile chases across frozen lakes, isn't just visually stunning. It's a demonstration of Xander's ability to instantly synthesize new environments into his repertoire of stunts. He treats these dangerous situations as highly complex life-or-death puzzles that only his specific combination of physical prowess and irreverent problem-solving can unlock. The precision required for these sequences mirrors the razor-thin margin for error that professional extreme athletes must navigate. One wrong move and the performance, or the mission, ends fatally. The climax on the secluded island base is less a conventional siege and more a highly choreographed, continuous extreme sports demonstration punctuated by lethal force. Xander's descent is the ultimate declaration of dominance over the environment, an acrobatic rejection of static defense. When he finally faces Xiang, there's a shared understanding of having walked the same dark paths, but Xander wins because he still retains a tether to the joy of living, while Xiang is entirely consumed by the memory of betrayal. Xander proves that true rebellion isn't about destruction. It's about asserting the right to define one's own terms of engagement with the world, a philosophy that keeps him eternally in motion, always ready for the next impossible descent or ascent. The aftermath of the Pandora's Box confrontation leaves Xander and his team briefly basking in the ambiguous glow of success. They have saved the world, naturally, but they have done so outside the lines, creating new liabilities for the very agencies they served. Jane, recognizing the political fallout that will inevitably try to contain or discredit Xander's methods, facilitates their immediate dispersal. The team members, forged in the crucible of shared danger, understand this unspoken agreement. They scatter back into the shadows from whence they were plucked, maintaining their tenuous digital connections, ready for the next inevitable call. Wolf and Stone, having shed their initial military rigidity through Xander's influence, likely find themselves operating in a gray area, perhaps utilizing their hard-won skills for ethically ambiguous but ultimately beneficial endeavors, forever bound by the unspoken oath of the XXX Brotherhood. Nads melts back into the global electronic ether, his surveillance network now exponentially more sophisticated, capable of mapping global threats from behind the decks of the world's most exclusive parties. Xander, however, finds himself in a peculiar state of limbo. Having stared down catastrophic failure and won, the quiet life he briefly enjoyed now feels incomplete. The adrenaline high of dismantling Xiang's operation is replaced by the subtle anxiety of stillness. He retreats not to a pristine beach this time, but perhaps to a remote, challenging landscape, maybe the rugged peaks of the Himalayas or the desolate expanse of the Patagonian wilderness. He seeks an environment that demands respect through its very hostility, continuing his self-imposed training regimen. This isn't about avoiding the next call, it's about ensuring he is always in peak condition for the inevitable moment when the world proves too complex, too dangerous for conventional heroes. The seeds of the next entanglement are sown subtly, often through encrypted channels or cryptic messages delivered via extreme sports stunts, a specific graffiti tag left on a remote half-pipe, a coded transmission hidden within a professional video edit of a world record jump. The threat, which always seems to materialize when Xander is at his most relaxed, is never simply geopolitical this time. It often involves a dark echo from his past, perhaps an operative who felt betrayed by his previous retirement, or a new global syndicate that has learned from Xiang's playbook, aiming for a more technologically insidious form of chaos. This antagonist understands that defeating Xander Cage isn't about matching his stunts. It's about cutting off his ability to improvise, forcing him into a predictable, rule-bound engagement where his fluidity becomes a liability. The narrative pivot here is Xander's growing acceptance that he is not just an operative, but an institution unto himself, a necessary, albeit disruptive, force for global equilibrium. He knows that the bureaucracy will eventually require him to conform, which means the next mission will likely involve a direct confrontation with the very structures Jane represents. This sets up a future where Xander might have to save the world from its own intelligence community. The underlying emotion driving him forward is no longer just a thirst for adrenaline, but a deep, almost paternal responsibility to protect the vulnerable chaos he thrives in. He understands that his freedom is a shield for others who wish to live outside the system's suffocating reach. The final image of this chapter is Xander accepting a challenge. Not by answering a phone call, but by undertaking an act of extreme defiance purely to draw out his next foe, confirming that for Xander Cage, the return is not an event, it is a permanent state of being. The dispersal of the newly minted xXx cell is executed with the practiced ease of seasoned professionals who understand that prolonged proximity breeds predictability, a fatal flaw in their line of work. Wolf and Stone, shedding the vestiges of their former rigid doctrines, likely gravitate towards high-stakes private security contracting, operating in the ethical gray zones where government oversight falters. One can easily picture Wolf channeling the intense focus required to maintain world-class physical condition, now applying that relentless self-discipline to high-risk extraction missions, her reputation preceding her like a silent promise of flawless execution. Stone probably finds his footing leading specialized training exercises for reluctant clients, his skepticism softened slightly by the realization that true effectiveness lies outside the manual. Nods, the digital shaman, experiences the most profound transformation in his operational environment. He doesn't just go underground, he becomes the underground. His ability to weaponize culture and data streams means he's likely running complex counter-surveillance operations for figures who cannot afford official attention, his influence spreading like an invisible web woven through global fiber optics, all while maintaining the facade of a successful, if eccentric, music producer. Xander's self-imposed isolation this time feels less like a vacation and more like tactical hardening. He seeks out environments that test the very limits of human endurance, perhaps dedicating months to mastering a near-impossible ascent on Himalayan ice faces or navigating whitewater rapids in uncharted South American tributaries. This physical mastery is his penance and his preparation. He isn't merely waiting for the next threat. He is actively increasing the difficulty parameter of his own existence, ensuring that when the call comes, he is operating at a level of performance that the organized world cannot comprehend. The new threat materializes not through conventional intelligence intercepts, but through a disruption in the very flow of extreme sports culture that Xander views as his spiritual homeland. Perhaps a series of radical, seemingly random acts of sabotage plague the world's most daring underground events. A drone swarm targeting a wingsuit flyer, an avalanche triggered with impossible precision on a closed slope. This indicates a perpetrator who hasn't just studied Young, but who has understood Xander's philosophy and is attacking the very concept of freedom and risk that defines him. This antagonist likely operates with a calculated disdain for brute force, preferring systemic dismantling, forcing Xander to fight on a chessboard where the pieces move according to physics he himself helped pioneer. The emotional core of this next chapter rests on Xander's realization of his own necessary mythos. He is no longer just an athlete or an agent. He is the living embodiment of resistance to oppressive control, whether that control comes from a rogue operative or a stifling government apparatus. His relationship with Jane becomes more complex. She respects his power, but fears his uncontrollability. The challenge will be when the next mission requires a level of bureaucratic compliance Xander simply cannot offer, forcing him to choose between the mission's success and his own inviolable principles. The narrative hints at a confrontation where Xander must leverage his reputation, the very notoriety he tried to escape, as his ultimate weapon, drawing out the enemy by publicly committing an act of beautiful, necessary anarchy that forces the established powers to either sanction his chaos or try futilely to contain it. He chooses the latter, understanding that by making himself the visible target, he clears the path for his dispersed team to operate unhindered in the shadows. The unfolding threat, targeting the very nexus of extreme culture, forces Xander out of his self-imposed crucible. His response is not a quiet return to Langley's fold, but a spectacular, globally televised act of defiance. Imagine a massive international free climbing competition held in a strategically vital yet politically ambiguous location. Perhaps a contested border region rich with natural resources. Xander doesn't show up to compete, he hijacks the event. He uses the infrastructure, the rigging, the cameras, the live feeds, to broadcast a message directly challenging the new adversary, making the entire world witness his re-entry. This is Xander weaponizing spectacle, turning his expertise in controlled risk into a public relations campaign designed to lure his enemy into the open, away from the delicate infrastructure they prefer to target. This public declaration immediately puts him at odds with Jane and the official agencies. They see a liability. Xander sees a necessary distraction. He knows that to fight an enemy who understands the systemic weaknesses of the modern world, he must become the ultimate variable, the one factor that cannot be modeled or predicted. He reaches out to his fragmented team not through secure government channels, but through the very digital and physical channels the antagonist is attempting to corrupt. A coded message hidden within a live drone race overlay, a physical package left at a specific, legendary skate park, accessible only via a complex series of parkour routes. These are the breadcrumbs that signal the reunion. The reassembled xXx team finds their initial objectives inverted. Instead of defending infrastructure, they are now tasked with preserving pockets of true freedom and anonymity across the globe, safeguarding the very underground networks they originate from. Wolf and Stone are instrumental in securing these physical havens, using their tactical acumen to fend off corporate or governmental incursions disguised as security sweeps. Nads, meanwhile, engages in what can only be described as digital guerrilla warfare, not just hacking systems, but actively seeding the global network with misinformation and chaotic code to slow down the antagonist's centralized command structure. He ensures that every time the enemy tries to gain a foothold, the digital landscape shifts beneath their feet, a constant reminder that control is an illusion. The pursuit leads Xander to understand that this new enemy is obsessed with nullifying human unpredictability, the very quality Xander embodies. The antagonist views Xander not as a rival operative, but as a statistical anomaly that must be corrected for the system to achieve perfect efficiency. This conflict elevates the stakes beyond mere national security to a philosophical battle for the value of reckless, unquantifiable human endeavor. Xander, drawing on every lesson learned from snowboarding down sheer cliffs and leaping between skyscrapers, realizes that the only way to win is to make his actions so fundamentally irrational, so completely outside the expected parameters of espionage, that the enemy's predictive models fail entirely. The final engagement eschews the traditional fortress assault. Instead, it unfolds across a series of rapid, interconnected challenges, perhaps involving a high-speed convoy rescue across a treacherous mountain pass, followed immediately by a subsurface dive to disarm a submerged data mine. Xander's brilliance is now fully realized in his ability to seamlessly transition between these disparate physical disciplines, demonstrating that the mindset of an extreme athlete, total commitment, flawless reaction time, and unwavering confidence in an improbable outcome, is the ultimate countermeasure to calculated control. He doesn't just defeat the antagonist, he invalidates their entire premise, proving that while systems can be controlled, the human spirit, when truly unleashed, remains ungovernable. The culmination of this resistance against calculated control is marked by a truly breathtaking set piece that eschews conventional military theater entirely. Xander engineers a confrontation within a massive, perpetually moving environment, perhaps an enormous abandoned offshore oil rig being repurposed for high-tech data storage, or maybe even a fleet of autonomous cargo ships linked by high-speed magnetic rails across a stormy sea. The setting itself becomes an active participant, demanding constant, acrobatic adaptation from the team. This environment perfectly mirrors Xander's worldview, dynamic, unforgiving, and rewarding those who can master constant change. The final showdown with the system-obsessed antagonist is personal, devoid of grand speeches, but rich with unspoken tension. The enemy, often represented by an almost invisible technological presence directing forces, finally manifests perhaps through a highly specialized, technologically augmented operative who attempts to physically match Xander's prowess while operating under perfect algorithmic guidance. This operative relies on pre-calculated reaction times and optimized movement patterns. Xander defeats this perfect machine not by being faster in a straight line, but by introducing genuine, beautiful, unpredictable error into the equation. He might intentionally misjudge a crucial jump, or deliberately take a physically disadvantageous position, knowing that this deviation will cause the algorithm controlling his opponent to crash or miscalculate the response time, opening a window for a decisive, intuitive strike. Wolf and stone are key here, providing the anchor of necessary brute force and tactical covering fire when Xander enters his most abstract phases of movement. Their initial skepticism has fully morphed into faith in Xander's method. They function as his protective shell while he dances on the edge of impossibility. Nads, orchestrating the chaos from a distance, ensures that the antagonist's communication lines are saturated with noise, turning their own sophisticated network against them, bombarding them with irrelevant, high-volume data that masks Xander's true movements. The emotional catharsis comes when Xander looks upon the defeated system. There is no gloating, only a profound sense of duty fulfilled. He has reaffirmed the value of the outsider, the necessary anarchy that prevents total stagnation. He secures the core data or device, not by turning it over to the authorities, but by ensuring it is decentralized or neutralized in a way that prevents its weaponization by any centralized power, agency, or rogue element. Following the victory, the dispersal is even swifter and more absolute than before. Xander understands that his success creates a vacuum, and that vacuum will inevitably be filled by the next threat, trying to exploit the moment of weakness. He doesn't seek congratulations or recognition. Such things are ballast that slows him down. His final interactions with Jane are brief, perhaps a shared glance across a massive international airport terminal, acknowledging the necessary partnership while confirming their fundamental incompatibility in terms of operational philosophy. She manages the cleanup and political spin. He ensures the true danger is permanently eliminated. Xander then vanishes, leaving behind only the lingering sense of an impossible feat accomplished. The final shot is typically Xander in his element, perhaps seen from afar, having already moved on to an entirely new, isolated location, already pushing a new piece of gear or a new physical boundary. He is the eternal guardian of the edge, forever tethered to the world by the knowledge that as long as there are limits to be broken, he will be the one to break them, perpetually returning because the threat of absolute order is far more terrifying than any immediate danger he faces. The silence that follows Xander's departure from the operational theater is never truly silent. It is merely devoid of official noise. He retreats not just geographically but philosophically, seeking environments where the rules of human society are superseded by the immutable laws of nature, the biting cold of untouched glaciers, or the crushing pressure of the deep ocean trenches. This period of self-imposed austerity is critical. It's where he recalibrates his intuition, treating his body and mind as instruments requiring constant, brutal tuning. He's not avoiding the world. He's ensuring he's calibrated for a world that keeps getting faster and more interconnected, a world where the next threat will undoubtedly operate with even greater speed and sophistication. The echoes of his triumph reverberate through the clandestine world, inspiring a new generation of independent operators while simultaneously drawing the ire of established powers wary of unchecked heroism. Jane, his reluctant handler, undoubtedly faces intense scrutiny. She becomes the gatekeeper, skillfully deflecting inquiries and fabricating plausible narratives around the chaos Xander leaves in his wake, operating with the precise, contained energy of a diplomat forced to negotiate on behalf of a brilliant, unpredictable hurricane. Her enduring effectiveness lies in her ability to shield Xander from bureaucratic consequence long enough for him to complete his objectives. The reunion of the xXx cell this time carries a weight of established camaraderie tinged with a shared understanding of their unique isolation. Wolf and Stone, having fully embraced the life outside traditional command structures, likely operate with a seamless, almost telepathic synchronization, their earlier friction smoothed into a highly efficient operational rhythm. They are the steel spine that allows Xander the freedom to be the unpredictable edge. NADS, his digital signature becoming increasingly ephemeral and untraceable, acts as the team's oracle, predicting shifts in global power structures by reading the subtle tremors in underground digital communities. He's the cultural seismographer reading the precursor waves of large-scale conflict. The emerging antagonist often seems to be a figure obsessed with optimization through control, a direct thematic opposite to Xander's celebration of spontaneous excellence. This enemy might not be motivated by simple revenge or power acquisition, but by a cold, logical desire to eliminate inefficiency, viewing human freedom and error as pollutants in the grand global machine. Their methods would be insidious, perhaps targeting infrastructure not for destruction, but for subtle manipulation, altering financial markets, subtly corrupting navigation systems, or introducing undetectable biases into artificial intelligence programs that guide global defense. Xander recognizes this threat by the way it tries to impose narrative. It seeks to write the script for the world, while Xander's life has been a continuous act of tearing up the script mid-sentence. His engagement with this foe is characterized by a deeper sense of philosophical commitment. It's no longer just about surviving the stunt, it's about defending the very right to attempt the impossible, the messy, beautiful process of human endeavor. He leverages his notoriety not as a calling card, but as bait, deliberately creating high-visibility scenarios that force the enemy to expose their centralized control systems. If the antagonist relies on perfect data modeling, Xander will feed them a torrent of carefully crafted, utterly nonsensical input. A zero-gravity base jump followed by a high-speed ice climb using medieval climbing tools, forcing their algorithms into recursive loops of failure. The ultimate confrontation transcends a single location. It becomes a distributed attack on the enemy's core philosophy. Xander and his team might engage in a sequence of simultaneous, synchronized actions across continents, a physical infiltration led by Xander, a data siege by NADS, and tactical distractions managed by Wolf and Stone, all designed to prove that a decentralized, adaptable force fueled by passion will always outmaneuver a rigid, centrally controlled system. Xander's victory is sealed when the antagonist's highly optimized system breaks down, not from overload, but from confronting something genuinely new and wholly human. He wins by demonstrating that true mastery lies not in eliminating risk, but in embracing it so completely that you become untouchable by those who fear it. The final quiet understanding is that Xander Cage will never truly retire. He is the constant, necessary friction against the slow, deadly slide towards perfect, predictable order. The lingering effects of Xander's latest victory manifest as a quiet, almost unsettling perfection in his immediate surroundings. The world, for a brief moment, seems to breathe easier, yet Xander feels the subtle tightening of the net around the fringes he occupies. The agencies, having witnessed his efficacy, are now wrestling with how to integrate such an unpredictable variable into their long-term planning. This inevitably leads to the emergence of a new bureaucratic challenge, one cloaked not in villainy but in misguided attempts at control. A governmental or perhaps a supranational body seeking to impose an international oversight protocol on all non-sanctioned paramilitary activity. This protocol, spearheaded by impeccably credentialed but ultimately unimaginative figures, aims to categorize and neutralize threats like Xander before they can escalate, effectively demanding that he sign up for mandatory performance reviews. Xander receives word of this through an unexpected messenger, perhaps a former protege or a young athlete who idolized his early exploits, now recruited into this new compliance unit. This messenger, bright and earnest, represents the seductive trap of legitimacy. They offer Xander amnesty, resources, and the official sanction to continue his work, provided he submits to mission parameters and oversight. This proposal strikes at the core of Xander's being. It's an attempt to domesticate the wild spirit of xXx. His reaction is characteristically dismissive, perhaps delivered while surfing a colossal wave during a hurricane, a visual metaphor for refusing to be contained by gentle, bureaucratic boundaries. The conflict shifts from hunting external enemies to evading internal containment. Jane, despite her loyalty, finds herself professionally compromised, forced to walk an ever-thinner tightrope between supporting Xander and adhering to the new protocols. She becomes an unwitting early warning system, signaling when the administrative dragnet is about to close in. The team reunites not out of crisis, but out of shared necessity against this encroaching structure. Nods detects the systemic vulnerability. The oversight protocol relies on an unprecedented level of global data aggregation, creating a singular, highly tempting target for any future genuine rogue element. His mission is clear: fracture this centralized data pool before it can be exploited. Wolf and Stone are tasked with providing direct, non-lethal interference against the ground forces sent to apprehend Xander, forcing the protocol agents into situations that demand improvisation, situations they are demonstrably ill-equipped to handle compared to the seasoned, intuitive responses of the xXx veterans. Xander's objective is the most audacious. He must discredit the entire concept of centralized oversight by executing a mission so vital, so undeniably successful, that the protocol's architects are publicly embarrassed or forced to concede that Xander's unique brand of chaos saves more lives than their sterile order ever could. This mission usually involves saving a critical figure or preventing a technological disaster that the bureaucratic system either engineered or is too slow to react to. The climax involves Xander intentionally leading the enforcement teams, who are technologically superior but tactically inferior, into an elaborate series of traps designed to humiliate rather than harm. Imagine a chase involving customized snow vehicles across a volcanic ice field, where Xander uses geothermal vents and shifting ice formations as dynamic weaponry, leaving the structured armored columns stranded or sliding harmlessly into predetermined containment zones. The final confrontation isn't with a villain, but with the chief architect of the oversight protocol himself, perhaps a technocrat who once believed he could map every variable of human behavior. Xander proves him spectacularly wrong, not by destroying him, but by making him witness firsthand the catastrophic consequences of relying solely on predictable models when faced with true, adaptive human will. The victory is the preservation of operational freedom, ensuring that when the next real threat emerges, xXx will be ready to ride the edge, unencumbered by committees and regulations. The institutional pushback against Xander's untamed effectiveness forces a fascinating evolution in his approach. He realizes that physical evasion is temporary. True freedom requires neutralizing the conceptual threat of total oversight. The central theme becomes the defense of unpredictability itself, the very oxygen that fuels Xander's existence. When the earnest young operative, representing the face of the new oversight protocol, arrives to court Xander, Xander's response is visceral, not anger, but a profound, almost sad pity for someone who has traded potential for prescription. He sees the young man as a highly skilled athlete who chose the gym circuit over the wilderness, sacrificing genuine growth for structured praise. Jane's predicament becomes a microcosm of the film's tension. She is performing delicate diplomatic surgery, using her established credibility to buffer Xander from immediate legal consequences, but every successful mission makes her position more tenuous. Her communication with Xander is reduced to coded acknowledgments, often delivered through seemingly innocuous public announcements or obscure classified data drops, confirming her silent support while publicly maintaining necessary distance. The mandate for the reformed xXx team is to wage a war of disruption against the centralization of data. NADS takes this challenge personally, viewing the protocol's centralized server hub, perhaps built beneath a seemingly impenetrable global stock exchange, as the ultimate fortress of conformity. His digital assault isn't about theft, but about inoculation. He floods the system with meticulously crafted noise, fake mission reports, corrupted training simulations, and phantom threat alerts, effectively rendering the protocol's predictive models useless by flooding them with perfect yet false reality. This requires a level of creative digital artistry akin to performance art, where the output is intended to confuse and overwhelm rather than merely crash. Wolf and Stone embrace their role as the physical deterrent to bureaucratic interference. Their engagements are characterized by a strange restraint. When intercepting protocol field teams, their goal is never permanent injury, but maximum operational disruption and demoralization. They disable vehicles with surgical precision, trap enforcement agents using highly specialized, non-lethal countermeasures derived from Xander's own extreme sports gear. Think instant freeze foam canisters or high-intensity flashbangs disguised as emergency flares. They demonstrate to the protocol's disciplined soldiers that rigid training fails instantly when confronted by adaptive, playful combatants who see the battlefield as a dynamic playground. Xander's primary objective is orchestrated to be a public relations masterstroke masquerading as a rescue. He targets a critical scientific breakthrough, perhaps a sustainable energy source or a cure for a widespread disease, that the protocol leadership intends to hoard and release only under highly controlled, politically advantageous conditions. Xander, operating on pure humanitarian impulse untainted by political calculus, stages a brazen extraction. This mission requires him to infiltrate a high-security research facility built deep underground, forcing him into environments where his usual reliance on speed and open space is curtailed. Here, he has to adapt his physical prowess to claustrophobic, technically dense environments, relying on kinetic problem-solving, using ventilation shafts as launch points, exploiting hydraulic systems for rapid vertical movement. The climax against the protocol's architect, the technocrat dedicated to enforced order, is deeply symbolic. Instead of a physical brawl, Xander engineers a scenario where the technocrat is forced to rely on Xander's methods to save his own life or the life of the scientists they were attempting to control. Perhaps the facility suffers a critical systemic failure, engineered subtly by NADS, that only Xander's intuitive, immediate maneuvering can rectify. Xander saves them not by following procedure, but by breaking it in the most extreme way imaginable. He forces the technocrat to experience firsthand the terror and exhilaration of operating without a safety net, proving that true resilience lies not in avoiding risk, but in mastering the fear associated with it. The aftermath sees the oversight protocol dissolving in a cloud of political embarrassment and operational failure. Xander achieves his goal. He hasn't just escaped control. He has demonstrated its fundamental inadequacy in the face of real-world complexity. He leaves the defeated technocrat with a final, clear message, perhaps delivered via a shared screen during the crisis. The world needs its anomalies, its engines of necessary chaos to evolve. Xander disappears again, but this time there is a slight shift in his solitude. He is no longer hiding from the world, but rather positioning himself strategically outside of it, a necessary force of nature waiting for the next storm that bureaucratic order cannot weather. The return of Xander Cage, as presented in the 2017 installment, operates within a familiar, yet increasingly globalized, action framework, striving to recapture the anarchic, extreme sports edge that defined its early 2000s predecessor, while simultaneously attempting to navigate the modern cinematic landscape, saturated with super spy narratives. Vin Diesel reprises the role of Xander Cage, a figure whose very existence is predicated on defying conventional authority and showcasing breathtaking, often physics-defying stunts. Diesel, by this stage in his career, was synonymous with muscular franchises built on brotherhood and spectacle, a brand solidified by the Fast and Furious saga. This connection is critical. xXx. Return of Xander Cage feels less like a standalone sequel and more like a transatlantic cousin to Fast and Furious, trading slightly less emphasis on cars for snowboards, motorcycles, and jet skis. The narrative thrust revolves around a stolen doomsday device, Pandora's box, placing Cage and his newly assembled team of operatives, each an expert in their niche field, reflecting the modern trend toward diverse, specialized ensemble casts, against a rogue agent, Xiang, portrayed by Donnie Yen. Yen's inclusion is perhaps the film's most significant strategic move. Yen, a global martial arts icon whose reputation was built on meticulous choreography and nuanced action, brings a level of physical discipline that contrasts sharply with Cage's brute force, adrenaline-fueled approach. Their rivalry is less ideological and more a clash of action aesthetics. Cage represents the maximalist, over-the-top Hollywood action spectacle, while Yen embodies a more refined, grounded, relatively speaking, combat style. The film struggles most significantly in justifying its existence beyond spectacle. The plot itself is remarkably thin, serving primarily as scaffolding for the set pieces. We are reintroduced to Cage in self-imposed exile, requiring recruitment by the CIA operative Jane Mark, played by Toni Collette. Collette's performance attempts to inject a necessary layer of bureaucratic cynicism, but the script rarely allows her character depth beyond exposition delivery. The motivations feel recycled. The government needs the untouchable outsider to retrieve something too dangerous for their conventional agents. What the movie undeniably delivers, however, is scale. The set pieces are geographically ambitious, moving from the jungles of Thailand to the urban sprawl of cities across the globe. The signature sequence involving an airborne motorcycle jump across a massive gorge, or the underwater infiltration, highlight a commitment to practical, large-scale stunts often eschewed in favor of pure CGI spectacle in contemporary blockbusters. This adherence to tangible, albeit exaggerated physical performance seems to be the franchise's core appeal, a throwback to a certain era of action cinema where the danger felt marginally more immediate. Thematically, the film attempts to explore the concept of extreme itself, who gets to define who is an operative, and whether true patriotism requires operating outside established legal frameworks. However, this exploration is superficial. The film's true allegiance is to the global marketplace. The casting choices, including Deepika Padukone as Serena Unger, a liaison between Cage and Xiang, who brings her own significant South Asian market appeal, demonstrate a clear intention to appeal beyond the core Western demographic, an acknowledgement of cinema's broader international reach. Padukone, known for her poise, brings a necessary seriousness to the team dynamics, even when the dialogue around her occasionally borders on cliché. Ultimately, xXx, Return of Xander Cage functions best as an exercise in franchise resuscitation built entirely on visual audacity. It understands its audience craves high-octane thrills divorced from complex geopolitical nuance. It doesn't redefine the action genre, but it successfully reestablishes its central figure as a master of mayhem, competent in any environment, provided that environment allows for a spectacular, improbable escape sequence involving high-velocity transport and copious amounts of debris. The film is an adrenaline shot rather than a complex narrative experience. The emotional landscape of this installment is deliberately sparse, prioritizing kinetic energy over introspection. Xander Cage, resurrected from his supposed death, carries a certain weary bravado. Diesel plays Cage not as a soldier burdened by duty, but as a perpetually surfing icon. His motivations are rooted in loyalty to his found family and the sheer thrill of operating beyond the rules. His charisma, heavily dependent on his signature ice blue eyes and collection of oversized, unnecessary jackets, functions as a necessary deflection from the narrative shortcomings. He is the ultimate outsider, the anti-Bond, whose suitability for espionage stems entirely from his capacity for glorious, public destruction. The dynamic between Cage's crew, an assembly of hackers, gearheads, and extreme athletes, is one of enforced camaraderie. It mirrors the modern workplace expectation that any problem can be solved by assembling a highly specialized, diverse group that communicates primarily through technical jargon and supportive grunts. Nina Dobrev, as the weapons specialist Becky Clearidge, embodies this archetype, providing necessary exposition while managing technology that feels perpetually 3 steps ahead of reality. Her character exists to validate the team's viability in the digital age, contrasting Cage's reliance on raw physical instinct. Donnie Yen's Xiang provides the necessary gravitational counterweight, his internal conflict being a former operative-turned-vigilante who feels betrayed by the same establishment Cage rejects, offers the film its fleeting moments of thematic resonance. Yen's fight choreography, when it appears, slows the film's relentless pace just enough for the audience to register the technical skill involved. In their final confrontation, the blend of Cage's chaotic energy against Xiang's precise strikes encapsulates the film's overall aesthetic compromise, the need to marry Hollywood's penchant for explosive excess with the authenticity that martial arts cinema demands. Toni Collette's Mark is often portrayed as the harried gatekeeper, the one forced to employ the very chaos she is sworn to contain. She represents the failing infrastructure of traditional intelligence agencies, too slow, too ethical, or simply too predictable for the escalating threats posed by global terrorism channeled through supervillains with stylish layers. Her barely concealed exasperation is relatable, underscoring the absurdity of relying on a man who treats global security crises as an opportunity for extreme sports exhibition. The film's visual language leans heavily into saturation and kinetic blur. Director DJ Caruso, known for handling action sequences with a muscular intensity, ensures that every environment, whether a crowded Bangkok market or a military satellite installation, is merely a complex obstacle course designed for Cage's eventual triumphant traversal. The underlying emotion sought is pure vicarious adrenaline, the feeling of being completely unconstrained by consequence. In this regard, the film succeeds modestly, operating as a loud, colorful distraction that temporarily suspends disbelief, asking the audience to accept that the world's fate can indeed hinge on a group of extreme enthusiasts performing acrobatic maneuvers in zero-gravity environments. It is loud affirmation that sometimes the only way to solve a problem is to ignore all protocol and simply jump off something incredibly high. The pervasive sense of manufactured coolness dictates every decision within the film's structure. Xander Cage's continued flirtation with death isn't framed as a tragic flaw, but rather as proof of his superior conditioning, a hallmark of action heroes whose narrative survival is guaranteed by their sheer iconicity. His interactions, particularly with Serena Unger, are couched in the language of mutual understanding between two people who recognize the inherent artifice of their dangerous lives. Deepika Padukone imbues Serena with a quiet authority that suggests a life spent navigating treacherous alliances. She is the grounded intelligence balancing Cage's impulsive nature, acting as a crucial emotional anchor that the surrounding mayhem often threatens to tear adrift. Their chemistry is rooted in shared competence rather than deep emotional bonding, suitable for a spy thriller where prolonged romance is an inconvenient distraction from the next explosive set piece. The film's commitment to its extreme mandate extends to the villains, who are never truly menacing, but function instead as highly stylized competitors. Xiang and his cohort are presented as anarchists with a moral code, mirroring Cage's own positioning. This narrative symmetry means that the core conflict often feels like a disagreement over methodology, rather than a genuine battle of good versus evil. The stakes are elevated purely through the scale of the destruction, not through complex moral quandaries. When Jiang reveals his true motivations, a desire to expose corruption within the intelligence community, the moment lands with muted impact because the film has already established that everyone in the system is compromised, including the very agency employing Cage. The pacing is relentlessly forward, rarely allowing the viewer space to process the logistics of the infiltration or extraction plans. This urgency mirrors the modern blockbuster's fear of boredom, demanding constant visual stimulation. The transition from the high-speed urban chase to the bizarre, zero-gravity aerial sequence feels less like an escalation of tension and more like the mandatory checking off of a specific action subgenre box. Caruso directs these sequences with a kinetic confidence, but the lack of physical consequence diminishes the sense of real danger. When Cage crashes through obstacles, the debris flies in artful arcs, suggesting a choreography where physics is merely a suggestion. Moreover, the film acknowledges its own legacy by resurrecting characters from the original XXX, most notably Augustus Gibbons, whose spectral presence validates the continuation of the program. This reliance on nostalgia serves as an emotional shortcut, reassuring longtime fans that despite the new cast and global scope, the spirit of the original rebellious entity remains intact. It is a calculated appeal to an audience that preferred the early 2000s sensibility of individualized, rule-breaking heroism over the current trend of intricate, serialized superhero universes. The film ultimately succeeds by embracing its own absurdity, offering a loud, brash, and consciously shallow return to spectacle that doesn't aim for intellectual engagement, but for visceral excitement, cementing Xander Cage's place as the action hero, defined by how dramatically he can fall and still manage to land on his feet. The film's visual palette is a deliberate rejection of gritty realism in favor of vibrant, almost video game-like saturation. Every location is hyper-stylized, the tropical jungle base is impossibly lush, the urban settings gleam with neon, and even the snowscapes possess a pristine, almost artificial brightness. This aesthetic choice reinforces the core idea that this universe operates by its own set of visual laws, where clarity and explosive color trump verisimilitude. This commitment to high-contrast visual appeal connects directly to the modern marketing strategies of action cinema, where the trailer footage must translate instantly into compelling, easily digestible imagery for social media consumption. The technical prowess on display, particularly the seamless blending of location shooting with digital enhancements, speaks to the film's budget and its dedication to spectacle as the primary form of communication. The very notion of espionage in xXx, Return of Xander Cage, has been radically redefined to suit Cage's skill set. Traditional spycraft, infiltration through subtlety, intelligence gathering through covert means, is replaced by infiltration through massive public display. When Cage needs to access a secure location, the solution invariably involves causing a localized catastrophe involving extreme sports equipment. This shift signifies a broader cultural acceptance in action cinema that true competency now equates to the ability to command attention, to make one's presence known unequivocally. The infiltration of the secret facility in the climax, involving airborne maneuvers and massive, coordinated explosions, is less a feat of espionage and more a high-stakes demonstration of organizational capacity for chaos. The character dynamics, while superficially diverse, rarely delve into genuine friction beyond the immediate tactical necessity. The team members function as perfectly calibrated tools. Their distinct skills, hacking, demolitions, specialized piloting, are deployed and then neatly put away, preventing any lasting tension from developing that might slow the forward momentum. This contrasts sharply with the interpersonal complexities often explored in contemporary espionage thrillers, where the protagonist's trust issues or fractured past drive the plot. Here, trust is instantaneous because the script demands immediate, unwavering unity against the external threat, which functions as little more than a plot device to activate the set pieces. The emotional stakes are kept artificially low so that the audience can enjoy the destruction without moral entanglement. In essence, the film operates as a curated highlight reel of extreme activities draped in the thinnest veneer of a spy plot. It's a product engineered for maximum global kinetic impact, less concerned with the legacy of espionage thrillers and more concerned with establishing a clear, loud successor brand to Diesel's other dominant action property. The film's triumph lies not in innovation, but in confidently occupying a specific, adrenaline-fueled niche that demands loud engines, impossibly high jumps, and charismatic defiance of Newtonian physics. It is a testament to the marketability of pure, uncomplicated spectacle. The film's soundtrack, an essential component of the extreme sports aesthetic, mirrors the visual loudness. It is a carefully curated tapestry of high-energy electronic beats and contemporary rock tracks designed to keep the audience perpetually wired, often drowning out the nuances of the thin dialogue. This auditory landscape functions not merely as background accompaniment, but as an active participant, signaling to the viewer precisely when to feel excited, when to anticipate a major transition, and when to ignore the sudden leaps in plot logic. The musical choices are deliberately contemporary, aiming to bridge the generational gap between the original film's early 2000s vibe and the current multiplex audience, often feeling more like a curated playlist for a high-budget commercial than an organic score. The performance capture and stunt coordination, while impressive in scale, reveal a key characteristic of modern action filmmaking: the diminishing returns of practical effects spectacle when divorced from genuine stakes. Even the most impressive sequences, such as the near free-fall infiltration, are undercut by the audience's implicit knowledge that Xander Cage, the franchise's central icon, cannot possibly fail or die in a manner that doesn't allow for a spectacular, physics-defying recovery. This inherent safety net softens the impact of the danger, transforming the action from thrilling risk into choreographed dance. The lingering shots on Diesel's determined grimace serve as reassurance to the viewer. This is spectacle without consequence. Furthermore, the concept of the team itself is highly commodified. Each operative is introduced with a brief montage highlighting their unique, often digital, superiority. They represent the modern workplace ideal where specialized roles are quickly filled by experts who require minimal emotional integration. There is a notable absence of the messy, interpersonal conflict that often fuels ensemble action films. Instead, we get efficient problem-solving delivered with a swagger. Becky Clearidge, the tech wizard, embodies the film's reliance on technological deus ex machina. Her ability to instantly bypass military-grade security systems with a few keystrokes provides narrative shortcuts, allowing the plot to move swiftly from one exterior set piece to the next without bogging down in realistic intelligence hurdles. The global scope, while visually ambitious, ultimately renders the locations interchangeable. The settings, be it a jungle, a European city, or an icy Russian installation, serve primarily as backdrops for vehicles and large explosions rather than environments that impose meaningful constraints on the characters. The film never truly immerses itself in the culture or politics of these places. They are simply arenas cleared for Xander Cage's specific brand of televised anarchy. This superficial globalism is a necessary evil of modern franchise building, ensuring box office viability across continents while ironically stripping the action of any grounding sense of place or local specificity. The entire exercise is focused on projecting an image of limitless, boundary-free action, perfectly encapsulating the desire for escapism untainted by geography or political reality. The film's thematic undercurrent, if one can call it that, is a celebration of hypercompetence in the face of institutional incompetence. Xander Cage and his team are consistently depicted as functioning at a peak efficiency that the established, suit-wearing intelligence apparatus, represented by Mark, can only dream of achieving. This narrative structure taps into a common modern frustration: the belief that genuine progress and problem-solving lie outside slow, bureaucratic channels. Cage is the ultimate manifestation of this ethos. His methods are violent, illegal, and reckless, but they work. This positions the film not just as an action movie, but as a quiet endorsement of radical individualism, albeit one cloaked in government sanction. The irony is that the entire premise requires the corrupt system to recognize its own failure and then hire the very type of agent it spent years trying to contain. The interaction between Cage and Xiang, the primary antagonists turned allies, further blurs the lines of morality. Xiang, driven by a desire to eliminate global arms dealers who operate with impunity, is positioned as a mirror image of Cage, an extreme agent operating outside the lines, but with an arguably cleaner moral compass regarding the actual weapon being trafficked. Donnie Yen's controlled menace provides the necessary gravitas, ensuring that when they fight, it feels personal, not just obligatory. Their shared respect is the film's emotional high-water mark, a moment where two highly skilled operators recognize a kindred spirit forced into adversarial roles by circumstance. This mutual understanding allows for the surprisingly rapid transition into a unified front, a narrative expediency that prioritizes action deployment over protracted ideological reconciliation. Deepika Padukone's Serena Unger is utilized effectively as the pivot point between the two male leads, possessing the requisite skills and backstory to bridge the gap between Cage's Americanized extremity and Xiang's more measured, disciplined approach. Her character operates with a necessary cynicism regarding alliances, suggesting that loyalty is a fluid commodity in their world. She is less a romantic interest and more a highly capable co-conspirator, allowing the film to avoid the emotional entanglement that often derails pure action narratives. Her moments of steely resolve in dangerous situations ground the team's efforts, proving that the ensemble is built on genuine capability, even if the script doesn't afford them much time for development outside of their assigned action roles. The final confrontation, taking place high above the ground and involving a satellite weapon, is the apotheosis of the film's obsession with defying gravity and common sense. It is spectacle elevated to the point of self-parody, precisely what the franchise demands. The visual effects are designed to overwhelm the viewer's critical faculties, leaving only the visceral reaction to the sheer audacity of the set piece. In the end, xXx, Return of Xander Cage is less a narrative continuation and more a successful branding exercise. It reminds the audience that Xander Cage is the quintessential anti-spy, an extreme athlete whose only recognized form of diplomacy involves breaking things spectacularly. The film concludes by setting the stage for further chaos, ensuring that if the market allows, Cage will once again be called upon to save the world by treating global threats like an ill-conceived extreme sports competition. The character of Xander Cage, as re-established here, thrives precisely because he exists outside the established nomenclature of espionage. He is not a James Bond, burdened by suits, classified briefings, and existential angst concerning empire or nation, nor is he the ethically tortured operative of modern, realistic thrillers. Cage is the ultimate libertarian action hero, whose primary allegiance is to adrenaline and the perceived purity of self-reliance. Vin Diesel emphasizes this through Cage's dialogue, minimal, often consisting of defiant one-liners or simplistic expressions of loyalty, allowing his physicality and the surrounding environment to do the narrative heavy lifting. His signature blend of casual defiance and supreme physical dexterity positions him as the singular solution when conventional logic fails. This persona is highly marketable because it offers a clear, uncomplicated escapism. In Cage's world, complexity is resolved not through diplomacy or intelligence analysis, but through the spectacular application of force and momentum. The ensemble cast surrounding Cage functions as a meticulously assembled toolbox, each member designed to unlock a specific type of cinematic challenge. Samuel L. Jackson's return, albeit briefly, as the shadowy governmental liaison reinforces the cyclical nature of Cage's recruitment. He is an asset too valuable to be permanently sidelined. This continuity, however thin, provides a structural anchor to the first film, while simultaneously justifying the necessity of extreme measures. The new recruits, hailing from diverse corners of the extreme sports world, serve to constantly remind the audience that Cage is not just a rogue agent, but the progenitor of an entire subculture of rule breakers who are now being weaponized. Their youth and digital fluency act as a contrast to Cage's more analog, brute force approach, yet they defer to his leadership, suggesting that experience in rebellion trumps technical wizardry. The film's climax, with its commitment to high-altitude, zero-gravity combat involving a satellite, pushes the boundaries of suspension of disbelief into the realm of pure fantasy. This sequence is engineered not to feel perilous in a relatable sense, but to feel overwhelmingly massive. It is a direct descendant of the bigger equals better philosophy that dominated large-scale blockbusters of the preceding decade. The emotional payoff in this final act is not rooted in whether Cage succeeds, which is foregone, but in the visual poetry of his survival amid overwhelming mechanical destruction. The choreography of the fight against Xiang in this weightless environment is a fascinating visual metaphor. Two masters of kinetic energy finally shedding the drag of gravity, allowing their skills to be displayed in an environment designed solely for visual maximalism, stripped of terrestrial limitations. Ultimately, the film functions as a successful exercise in franchise revival by recognizing and leaning into its own brand identity, loud, colorful, and utterly unconcerned with the internal logic of the spy genre. It doesn't attempt to compete with cerebral thrillers. Instead, it courts the audience craving pure, unadulterated action spectacle driven by a charismatic, impossibly resilient hero. It is a high-octane sugar rush designed to momentarily overwrite the memory of stricter, more grounded genre entries, asserting that in the world of Xander Cage, consequences are merely delays before the next spectacular re-entry. The deliberate lack of consequence permeates every aspect of the filmmaking, creating an atmosphere of consequence-free spectacle that defines the xXx brand. When Xander Cage performs seemingly suicidal maneuvers, leaping from aircraft onto moving vehicles or surviving catastrophic impacts, the audience is conditioned to expect a smooth, stylish recovery, often accompanied by a well-timed musical cue, signaling victory rather than relief. This certainty acts as a narrative safety net that shields the characters, and consequently the viewer, from genuine emotional investment in the peril. The danger is visualized, but never truly felt. This contrasts sharply with earlier action films, where the hero's survival often hinged on wit and luck. Here, it hinges on brand recognition and the established physics of the Cage universe. The aesthetic choices, particularly the use of vibrant color grading across disparate environments, further isolate the action from reality. The film refuses to adopt the muted, desaturated tones associated with contemporary geopolitical thrillers. Instead, the world is rendered in highly saturated primary and secondary colors, making explosions pop and costumes stand out, reinforcing the theme park quality of the experience. This visual decision aligns perfectly with Diesel's persona, which thrives in environments where everything is heightened and clearly demarcated, reducing moral ambiguity to an easily identifiable enemy team. Even the technology, while advanced enough to necessitate the global scale of the mission, is presented as flashy gadgetry, rather than complex, potentially flawed machinery. The relationship between the seasoned veterans and the new, digitally adept team members often resolves too cleanly. There's a token nod toward generational friction, the old guard versus the new, but it's quickly smoothed over by the necessity of the mission. Becky Clearidge and the other tech specialists exist primarily to rapidly solve problems that would otherwise require painstaking investigation. This expediency is critical. Any pause for genuine character development or logistical planning would interrupt the kinetic flow. The emotional undercurrent shifts entirely to the camaraderie between these hyper-competent individuals, a loyalty based on shared mastery of extremity rather than deep, long-term bonding. They respect each other's skills instantly, minimizing the traditional dramatic arc of earning trust. Toni Collette's Jane Mark serves as the necessary tether to the world of traditional spy work, but she remains frustratingly peripheral. Her scenes often feel like necessary bureaucratic hurdles that Cage must bypass or reluctantly humor. Colette's acting gravitas is mostly spent conveying exasperation with the absurd lengths required to employ Cage, functioning as the voice of reason that the audience is implicitly meant to disregard in favor of the chaos Xander brings. She is the established order being forced to embrace its own necessary obsolescence through the recruitment of the ultimate outsider. The film validates Cage's methods by showing that the official channels are invariably too slow or too compromised, positioning the anti-hero as the only truly effective agent of change. The entire structure suggests that true heroism in this modern cinematic landscape requires operating completely off the books, often in full view of the public. The constant movement within xXx return of Xander Cage demands a hero whose very nature resists stasis, and Diesel's portrayal leans heavily into this requirement. Cage is less a man making strategic choices and more a force of nature channeled through extreme sports metaphors. His dialogue, sparse and often referencing his past legendary exploits, often with a knowing smirk aimed directly at the camera, serves as a self-referential loop, affirming his status without needing plot justification. This reliance on established iconicity means that character growth is entirely superfluous. The audience returns for the reaffirmation of who Xander Cage is, not for who he might become. Donnie Yen's Xiang, conversely, is given the film's most compelling, albeit underdeveloped, internal conflict. He embodies the disillusioned patriot, a man who once believed in the system but now seeks to dismantle the corrupt elements within it, often through equally extreme means. This mirrored opposition between Cage and Xiang, both operating outside the law for ostensibly noble reasons, provides the strongest dramatic tension. When they engage in combat, it's portrayed with a visceral edge that momentarily slows the film's otherwise frenetic tempo, offering a glimpse into a world where skill and discipline still hold currency against sheer, explosive spectacle. Their eventual alignment is rapid, driven by the shared antagonist and the plot's need to synthesize its major action stars for the finale, reinforcing the film's primary objective: maximum talent deployed simultaneously. The recruitment process for Cage's new team feels less like intelligence gathering and more like scouting for a specialized extreme sports rally. Each new operative is presented as a virtuoso in their narrow field, suggesting that the threats of the modern world are best met by specialists who can execute dazzling maneuvers rather than broad strategic thinkers. This is symptomatic of the film's overall approach to conflict resolution. Every problem has a corresponding, high-velocity, highly improbable physical solution. The introduction of Deepika Padukone's Serena Unger as the liaison between the splintered factions is handled with a professionalism that suggests she is one of the few genuinely capable actors in the room, providing a necessary layer of gravitas to balance Cage's recklessness. The film's relentless pace, while ensuring that boredom is largely averted, simultaneously erodes any potential for dramatic weight. The transitions between geographically distant set pieces, from crowded Asian markets to remote military outposts, are jarringly abrupt, serving only to showcase the next location where something massive can be blown up. This narrative stitching suggests a global scope, but the environments lack texture. They function as elaborate, destructible arenas rather than meaningful settings. The overarching message remains consistent. In the face of global threats, the only viable response is an aesthetically pleasing, highly choreographed act of targeted demolition, led by the man who refuses to age or adhere to standard operating procedure. xXx Return of Xander Cage is therefore a triumphant exercise in brand management, successfully delivering the specific high-octane nostalgia package that the franchise promised its dedicated, albeit niche, audience. The triumph of the film lies in its unabashed commitment to the spectacular over the substantive, a philosophy that colors even the smallest character interactions. The supporting cast, while diverse in skill, largely lacks interiority. They exist to execute specialized tasks flawlessly, reflecting a modern corporate mindset applied to Black Ops. This emphasis on functional expertise over emotional connectivity allows the narrative machinery to run smoothly, ensuring that dialogue serves purely as transitional grease between action sequences. When a character expresses a moment of doubt or concern, it is immediately overridden by the visual urgency of the next set piece, effectively signaling to the audience that prolonged emotional engagement is counterproductive to the film's main purpose: pure, unadulterated kinetic release. This dedication to high-octane gloss extends even to the antagonist's motivations. Zhang and his faction are not motivated by nihilism or pure greed, but by a desire to correct perceived systemic failures, an ironically noble goal executed through terrorism. This slight moral ambiguity is immediately resolved by the narrative's structure, which positions Cage as the necessary, albeit ethically flexible instrument of balance. The audience is never asked to seriously weigh the moral implications of Cage's extreme methods versus Xiang's, because both are ultimately framed as more effective than the bureaucratic oversight embodied by Mark. It's a cinematic argument that efficiency, regardless of legality, is the highest virtue in a crisis. The visual execution of the stunts, particularly those involving multiple forms of transport colliding in improbable ways, leans heavily into the influence of video game physics. The physics engine of the film appears to allow for sustained impact without structural damage to the protagonist, a trait instantly recognizable to viewers immersed in contemporary gaming culture. This visual language speaks directly to a demographic accustomed to seeing high-level mastery achieved through repetition and spectacular, if unrealistic, execution. The film understands that its audience is preconditioned to accept the impossible, provided it is rendered with sufficient visual fidelity and swagger. When the film attempts moments of levity or attempted character bonding, such as the team sharing a brief moment of camaraderie after a successful infiltration, these moments feel mandated by genre convention rather than organically earned. They are brief pauses before the next required sequence of massive vehicle destruction. Xander Cage's charisma is the glue holding these disparate elements together, a singular force capable of commanding respect from elite hackers, martial arts masters, and disgruntled government agents alike, solely based on his reputation for survivability and his signature brand of rebellious cool. In summation, the film is a meticulously engineered product designed to deliver a specific high-decibel form of escapism, prioritizing the visual punctuation marks of action over the sustained rhythm of compelling storytelling. The film's reliance on the charisma of its lead and the spectacle of its stunt work creates a paradoxical situation. Xander Cage is positioned as the ultimate unpredictable agent, yet his actions are entirely predictable within the confines of franchise expectations. Diesel embodies this swagger with a performance that rarely deviates from the stoic yet supremely confident posture established in the earlier installments. His refusal to engage in the nuanced moral grappling common to modern spy heroes is his defining characteristic. Cage is uncomplicated, making him an easy anchor for an otherwise convoluted global plot involving stolen weapons and double-crossing agencies. This simplicity is both the film's greatest weakness in terms of narrative depth and its greatest strength in terms of mass-market appeal, promising uncomplicated thrills. The supporting cast, particularly the new additions, are meticulously cast not just for their skills, but for their global appeal, ensuring the film functions as an international box office venture. Deepika Padukone, as Serena Unger, carries herself with a quiet, almost world-weary competence that implies a deep reservoir of dangerous experience. She functions as a vital bridge, emotionally and strategically, between the chaotic energy of Cage and the disciplined, honorable fury of Xiang. Her presence validates the stakes by showing that even highly capable individuals are drawn into Cage's orbit of necessary lawlessness. In contrast, Nina Dobrev's Becky Clearidge represents the necessity of the digital age, her role being to instantly neutralize technological barriers, thus preserving the focus on Cage's physical prowess over complex cyber warfare scenarios. The film's visual lexicon heavily favors motion blur and explosive debris over clear spatial awareness, a technique that actively discourages close scrutiny of the action's logistics. When the team engages in high-speed chases or infiltration, the audience is meant to be swept along by the momentum, not to question how a team of rogue agents manage to procure military-grade hardware or how they evade global tracking systems. This aesthetic decision is a conscious one, distancing the narrative from the grounded, tactical reality of contemporary thrillers. Instead, the xXx universe exists in a hyper-stylized reality where the laws of inertia and consequence are constantly being renegotiated in favor of the next great visual payoff, such as the now infamous zero-gravity skirmish, which serves as the ultimate demonstration of the franchise's commitment to spectacle unbound by earthly limits. Ultimately, the success of xXx Return of Xander Cage is measured not by its storytelling coherence, but by its atmospheric consistency. It functions as an extended music video for extreme sports culture, leveraging Diesel's established brand identity and integrating global action icons like Yen and Padukone to secure broad market penetration. The film is loud, fast, and fundamentally hollow, but it delivers precisely the loud, fast, and fundamentally exciting experience it promises. It is a celebration of cinematic excess, where the most profound statement made is that in the face of overwhelming danger, sometimes the only sensible response is to jump off something enormous. The very concept of intelligence gathering in this installment has been thoroughly supplanted by spectacular infiltration. Traditional espionage relies on anonymity and the acquisition of secrets through stealth. Cage's operations demand the exact opposite. Every mission initiation is preceded by a flurry of high-decibel activity designed to draw every available eye. This brazen approach is a direct thematic statement. In a world saturated with information, true power lies not in knowing a secret, but in demonstrating the capacity to cause chaos on a scale that demands attention. This ethos is perfectly embodied by Cage's choice of transportation and entry methods, massive, highly customized vehicles that serve as mobile destruction platforms rather than discrete surveillance tools. Toni Collette's Mark operates in a perpetual state of barely suppressed disbelief, her facial expressions often conveying the exasperation of a senior manager forced to sign off on an expenditure report that features a $5 million allocation for custom-built snowmobiles capable of scaling military bunkers. She represents the dying breed of intelligence professional who believes in protocols, making her exasperation relatable to any viewer weary of organizational red tape. However, her function is purely reactionary. She exists to rubber-stamp the necessary absurdity required to deploy Cage, signifying the failure of conventional authority in the face of hyper-stylized threats. The internal team dynamics, while presented as a modern, diverse synergy, prioritize immediate utility over messy human interaction. The hackers, gearheads, and athletes don't debate strategy. They confirm their specialized functions with crisp technical affirmations. This creates an almost sterile efficiency, a cinematic workplace where interpersonal conflict is viewed as wasted screen time. Becky Clearidge, Dobrev, is the prime example.